Hello everyone, this is yours Trivia, and today we're starting a brand new Let's Play series on the channel featuring Black Myth Wukong. This game has been my most anticipated game ever since it was first announced 4 years ago, and it's been a long time waiting for this moment. And the game is important to me because it's a story that I grew up with. A Journey to the West was a very popular TV series in China when I was growing up in the early 1990s. And when I would get home from school every day, my grandparents would record reruns of the 1986 version of the TV series, and I got to watch a new episode every day. And as I got a little older, I read storybook versions of the novel. I collected trading cards of the characters from instant ramen packs, and I played knockoff games on, knockoff versions of NES console system that they had available. And it's always been part of my life. And as I grew older, I got to read the actual novel and come to understand the story a little bit more. And now in my 30s, I get to experience this very amazing game developed by a homegrown developer telling a very Chinese tale, and it's an experience that I'm eager to try. And for these reasons, I'm not so looking forward to the amazing combat system or the numerous bosses that they have, or sort of the graphics you can get from Unreal Engine 5, but rather I'm more interested in the authentic world building and the cultural references and Easter eggs you'll find saturated in the game, because the developers did a really good job of that, and you can even see it from the armor that Wukong is wearing right now. And for those who have the game and want to play along with me, I'm going to showcase my settings here a little bit. We're playing on PC with controllers, as you can tell. And we have tutorial on because I want to showcase sort of the beginning controller setup as well as some of the game concept, although I have played it a little bit myself, so not completely new to the game. As you can see, all the text as well as all the audio for the game will be in Chinese. And the reason for this is because to get the authentic version of the story, you need to see it in its native text. And I have the advantage of being able to read it and translate it for you and provide commentary and background that typical localized translations just not going to cover, because they need to be more concise with their translation, whereas I can talk my head off about some of the context of the story and explain it as we play along. So that's what this Let's Play will be kind of like. We'll take things slow. We'll talk about the characters. We'll talk about the Easter egg. I'm going to waste a lot of time bumping into invisible walls, trying to look for hidden areas of the stages. And there are a lot of hidden areas in the game. Almost half of the game is from hidden stages. This is our display setting. We are going to cap it at 60 frames. I'm going to have the vertical sync on to prevent some tear. There is no motion blur. I don't like it. I think it creates a little bit of dizziness, so turn that off. You can definitely have that on if you want. I don't think it's going to really affect your performance. For your actual setting of the game, the sampling's set to 85. I'm using a 3060 Ti, so it's not the most advanced graphic card you can have. So the setting's not going to be super amazing. DLSS is pretty good for motion related video motion, so it's going to be more clear when we're moving around. If you're using a NVIDIA card, this is definitely the way to go. No ray tracing. We're not using a 40 series or a high 30 series card, so just going to turn that off. And that means I'm going to turn off a lot of other settings. It's going to be very customized. So depth of vision, I prefer this to be cinematic. I don't like things loading in or out of the background. You can definitely have it slightly lower as well. Very high, it's pretty good too, but we're going to keep it at cinematic. And then these are like the edges. I prefer this to be a little bit high. Post-processing, I have it all the way to very low. This will have some effect to sort of the blur and glow that you will see, but I don't value those. So with the settings that I have, I feel like the characters are pretty high def, and the details in the world is fine when you are looking at them up close, and that's kind of what I value. Like vegetation is turned to low, hair quality is turned to low. That type of thing doesn't bother me. It might bother you, and if you prefer really high def 4K videos, this Let's Play is not for you. I'm more or less trying to enjoy the characters and the story that I can find in the game. Reflection is low, lights medium, cinematic for the image quality. I think this one's quite important. But if you're playing, especially on 1080, you definitely want your sampling to be as high as possible without really affecting your frame rates. You can definitely test out your benchmark, and 85 seems okay for me. There's going to be some stuttering, small spikes. I don't think it's that bad, especially in combat. I have tested it a couple times. I think it's pretty smooth. The game definitely could use slightly more optimization, but I don't think it's a big deal. So hopefully you found these settings helpful, and we're going to not do any change because I'm happy with the original that we had, and hop into game, a brand new game here. So let's play. Our story takes place after the completion of a journey to the west, so Wukong already completed his journey, and he has decided to forego his Buddhist or Buddha form, his title that he won after completing the journey, and return home to his mountain with his monkeys. And now he's under attack for some reason. Now the giant being in the middle is a bit unclear. He has this elephant armor in the front, kind of hint at the fact that he could have been the elephant monster from the original story. But the 4 other giants or titans are the 4 heavenly kings that guards the 4 gates of the celestial court. And they have their sword, their umbrella, their snake, and their peapot, or the musical instrument you see on the left there, as their weapons. They control sort of the wind and rain of the world from their heavenly court. With my settings, the clouds do not render very well. I do realize that, but like I said, there are some settings I'm willing to sacrifice for performance. These are just minions from the Celestial Court. They look kind of cool, but nothing impressive. Their helmet being sort of an eagle or a hawk is also kind of suspicious. Because the elephant, the hawk, and the lion are the 3 monsters from one of the original story scenes. He's explaining how he has completed the journey and did everything they asked, and all he wanted is to live in freedom here. But clearly it seems like the Celestial Court does not trust him, and that's why they're here to attack his home, trying to force him to go back and take his position in the heavenly court. We're quite pissed that they killed some of the other monkeys. So this is another clue that these guys are probably not the actual characters from the Heavenly Court, but maybe monster versions, because Xiao Tianquan, this hunting dog here, should be white. And this version is kind of screaming, "I'm kind of evil." And this is Erlangshen. He's calling his dog a dumb dog, which is kind of weird too. He has a skull on top and a Buddha in front, which are both kind of wrong. Kind of telling us how we're special, how we're too strong, and he's the one who can match us. He fought us in the original beginning of the novel when the Celestial Court came to attack this area too. He's claiming he beat us then, which is kind of true. He is quite strong. He matches our transformations, and we kind of fought him to a draw until another deity used basically a magical item to subdue us, and then he got to finish us off. He's explaining that, you know, he's gonna fight us in a duel. If he beats us, he will come and clean out all our little monkeys. But even if he lose, he says the troop behind is still going to kill all the monkeys as well. Trying to piss us off, asking us to bend our knees and apologize to, you know, spare all the monkeys behind us.
这么多年了，除了那只猪头，就属你最会扯淡。
Aside from Bajie, who is the pig, he says, aside from him, you're the only one who can, you know, bullshit and make me laugh. We're now threatening him that we're gonna take his third eye. The slit above his forehead is his third eye, and we're gonna eat it. And then we're gonna kill everyone behind him, because they're all dogs of the Celestial Court. And then we'll also kill the black dog too. Want to fight me one-on-one or together? Alright, we get a little tutorial on locking enemies. We have pretty much all our moves right now. This is a light attack. And there's heavy attack, that's a dodge. There's no parry mechanic, there is dodge. And you can combo heavy with light hits. Light hit go up to 5-hit combo, and you can basically end with a heavy on any of the first 4. And you can also hold... Ooh, there we go. We can also hold the heavy for a charge attack, which we failed because he knocked us out. There we go. That's a charge attack. And charge attack uses stance points, which you can see on the little circles on the right. We don't have a health bar. This is a tutorial fight, so we can kind of chill and talk about it. We also should have some spells, which I guess we could use. We have, let's see, the ability to freeze him, and then we can just kind of do our charge attack we want. There's a second charge if we hit the first one. And then we also have one which makes us... Yep. Make us invulnerable for a second. Ah, the first phase is over. That's our Buddhist title. Immortality comes with it, but we don't care because Wukong has so many different versions of immortality that he has gained throughout his journey. But Arlong Shen claiming it's valuable is kind of interesting. Ooh, he's unleashing his eye now. It's okay, we can use our spell again. Usually cost mana, but here we don't have a health bar or a mana or a stamina bar. We can do whatever we want. Our third spell, I think this is the summon a lot of monkey clone. Yeah, okay. Beat him up. Do something. I don't control them. They're pretty fragile though. Alright, we can do a charge attack. See, you see the staff has charged to gold now, and we get a big one. Well, he's distracted. That spell's over. Another cutscene. He's calling us a wild monkey. Untamed, uncivilized. Seems like your blade is dull. Help me scratch my back. Or scratch an itch. Alright, last phase. He has more moves. Oh, we can do this. We can block all the projectiles. If it's a light projectile. The big one we have to dodge. Let's just let him pose and we'll do our charge. You can see it's using this, it's charging the stance, and the bigger the stance charge, the heavier the hit. It's telling us to use heavy attacks, which I guess we are. Now before we kill him and trigger the next cutscene, let's talk about him a little bit more. He is technically the nephew of the Celestial Emperor. The third daughter of the Celestial Emperor in this version of the story went down to the mortal realm, fell in love, and had a kid with a mortal, and he's that kid. So he's sort of a half god. And then he went to go train with a Taoist immortal, and then he learned all his tricks. I mean, technically, we also went to learn it from Taoist immortal too. So he has very similar tricks to Wukong. 72 transformations. And then because he's sort of the bastard status, since Celestial Emperor does not recognize that little love affair, he does not get to stay on the Celestial Court. He has a little river area that he kind of governs over. He has a lot of followers and a lot of minions under him. And his story is really... Ooh. More cool. Ow. Guess we could use the spell to block that with invulnerability. Want to see more of his moves. But anyhow, he has a lot of origin stories because he's sort of one of these folklore characters turned into a deity. So before like Taoism claimed him, he existed as a folklore from... Ooh. Dude, this is cool. And then we block this. I failed to block it, but we were supposed to block that one. He also has a much older origin story. Ooh, that one's also new. There we go. Blocked it. Where he's the second son of Li Bing, who is administrator of the Shu commandery during the Kingdom of Qin, like during the Zhou dynasty. Very, very ancient. And that's why he's called Erlang. Erlang means second son. And Li Bing was in charge of working on the waterworks in the Shu area, because the Min River was... Ooh, the dog move. I've never seen that. We can freeze him. He will complete his attack after he unfreezes. And I didn't block. He didn't hit me. We'll summon. He's about to die. Want to finish his story. And he and his father constructed a waterwork called Dujiangyan, which is very famous in Chengdu area. And because of the construction of that waterwork, the entire basin area there has more controlled water supplies from irrigation. Oh, there we go. We beat him. And because of that, there are folklores of how they, beat river monsters, and that sort of became his origin story. And because he got popular in the Shu region, the Qiang tribes, the nomadic Qiang people, picked up on his folklore and made him sort of their folklore too. And in their culture, they tattoo the forehead. So they basically cut open a wound and put, dye materials in there. And that's why it looks like he has a third eye. And when that image of him, got spread back to the Central Plains, to the Han population, the Taoist, the deities kind of, gave him a third eye as a power. Now we're fighting the 4 Heavenly Kings, which has a Buddhist origin as well as a Taoist version. Our poor monkeys. Huaguoshan, or the mountain of flowers and fruits, where we're from, gets obliterated. A piece of it gets obliterated. This is a duel. Right, your uncle, that'd be the Celestial Emperor. We're referring to that. And we transform. Transformation battle was in the original novel as well, where they keep transforming to things that counter each other. Like a, little bird and a hawk, and then you transfer something that beats a hawk, and he transferred back to something that beats that. And very much like the first fight, some outside help is subduing us, in this case using the golden circlet, which should have been removed already after the journey to the west, but somehow it's appearing you know, in a sort of a materialized state. And because whenever you make a chant, when you have the circlet, Wukong basically loses all his ability to, you know, function. And that's the prologue. We don't actually play as Wukong. We play as the Destined One. And you'll see who the Destined One is. It's the last story of Wukong. Now a narrated monkey is going to give us the story. He preferred freedom. Yeah, not interested in, you know, being with the gods. Just wants to return home and spend his time with all the other monkeys. But those in power, you know, are still worried about him because you have so much abilities. They don't feel safe, and thus we get the attack, and now he's sealed in this rock. Came from a rock, right? We're a stone monkey. Unknown time. So it's been around since he was a little monkey. So many, many, many years. Right, the origin story is he's a stone monkey to begin with. And he's supposed to be undying. So even though his body is now sealed in the rock, his spirits and soul is still out there, spread in 6 relic items, and our goal is to collect these 6 to restore him. Now, Liu Gen is also a Buddhist concept of the 6th sense. We'll talk about it a little bit later. And that's the 6th relic we have to look for. That's our main character. The little tiger skirt is a callback to how Wukong looked in the 1986 story in the very beginning, before he became a Buddhist follower. He's too old to travel the 4 continents to seek these 6 relics, but we can do it. Once these relic returns here, maybe that's the time he can basically rebirth. And cue the logo and the prologue. And the music's just support, like, really, really good. Now, 4 continent is a Buddhism concept as well. I think in their version of the world. First chapter, 第一回, 火照黑云. The fire illuminates the black cloud. And this is a reference to the black wind monster, or the 黑风怪. It's a bear. He controls the wind, can transform himself into a gust of wind. And the fire symbolizes the burning of the Guanyin temple that introduced him to the original story. These are 2 wolf creatures that are patrolling the mountain for their leader. Picks up a peach off the ground, too hard to bite, because it's us, transform. They feel pranked, and we fight. So we can lock, and we can charge. You can see we're much weaker now. We don't have spells, and our charge bar only has 1 node. And we have what's called Ling Yun. Basically, their spirit or their will being absorbed. It's an experience point system in the game. You can use it to exchange for things. We're just going to do another charge attack and kill him. We got some fragments of gold. 晶石, sort of enhanced stone. Ooh, a voice from the ground saying that, you know, it's been so long, but we still like to prank people because we transform into that peach. Now, before we go on to explore, we're going to take a look at sort of the UI for the game and inventory and how the game functions for those who are playing. There is your skills. There are 127 skill points that you can click for your abilities. That includes things like using less stamina when you run around, or using less stamina when you do flips or jumps. And you can increase the distance of your first dash on your first light attack to close the gap. There's things like when you hit someone with the second move of your light attack, you get more of your stance points back. And then you can use the projectile deflecting version of the ability. We don't have that unlocked yet right now at level 1, whereas we had pretty much everything unlocked when we were fighting as Wukong earlier in the tutorial, increasing our max health, increasing our max stamina. Things that require higher level, you can see level 15. The little note on the bottom is the traditional Chinese lock. Essentially, the bar you see is sort of like the padlock right now. It's more curl nowadays, but in traditional Chinese lock making, that line sort of how the padlock work. You put that pin through the middle, and then you click it, and the key will go on the bottom part. That's where the key would fit. And aside from these 127 points that provides basic skills, there are also 57 points that deal with our staff. There are 3 stances of our staff, 3 different forms that do different things. They're Pi, Li, and Chuo. So basically sort of swipe, and this is sort of to stand on your stick. A lot of the move have you sort of using it as a leverage point, as you can see there on the map. And then this one's more about poke. And in the beginning, you can switch between stances, but you can definitely skill yourself towards one particular one if you prefer it. In general, this version is more of the close distant fighting. This one's the super long distant fighting, including some aerial fighting, because you can extend your stick and go up really, really high, as you can see right there in the video. And this one's sort of medium range. You kind of poke, your staff can extend, but not super long, not as long as you can make it go up. Essentially, you know, sort of covers all aspects of combat, since staff is our only weapon. But don't worry, aside from these 2 categories where we can use our level up points, you can see the padlocks also go up on the top, and there are actually 4 more tabs covering the 4 different spell slots that we have, including transformations. And when we transform, obviously that introduces like a whole new moveset with each of the bosses that we can transform into. And there are a ton of bosses that we can collect. Those things are locked now because we haven't learned any spells and we haven't defeated any bosses. So lots of things with character builds. It's more of an action RPG with bosses. It's not a strict action RPG. It's not a strict soul-like. There's elements of both. It's its own thing. And we have our inventory system. We have our staff, our weapon. This is locked, so I don't know what that is right now. We have our circlet, which we have nothing right now. We have our sort of clothing. And right now, this is sort of the tiger skirt. It provides 5 points of defense. There are stats in the game. You can see our experience bar on the top. We're level 1 with a little bit of experience after beating those guys. And there's other stats, and you can also visually look at beautiful art. Definitely a very modern game, so to speak. And before we go on, there's other things. We also have a wrist that we can use. And right now we just have sort of this silk wrap, 2 points of defense. And then I'll keep using the wrong button. It's been a long time since I played a controller game, so it will take some getting used to. Also a silk leg wrap, and you know, we can take a look at that too, as well as our staff. And there are a couple of different staff we can get. Right now we just have a basic wooden one with 30 attack. There's other attributes you can have. Now I don't think it's an item farming game. I think the stats are pretty preset on the items, so it's more about collecting different versions and getting different build options rather than trying to farm for like different stats of the same version of the staff. At least that's what I believe. We'll find out as we play. And there's also little flavor text on them. Not really going to cover the flavor text of the items that much. There's also 2 accessory slots. We currently don't have anything. Our hulu, or our gourd, Hulu would be the Chinese version of the gourd. This is where we keep sort of our recovery liquid. Could be a variety of different kinds. You can have different attributes on it. And you can see exactly what we have right here. Currently, it's filled with a coconut liquor, and every time we drink it, we heal up to 1/3 of our health. It's very pretty. The game is very stunning visually. We also got a couple things. Yeah, I keep clicking the right trigger and buttons differently. We have fragments of gold, and this is something we can use as currency to buy things. And then this is a Jingshi. It's used to enhance weapons. It's a war. And aside from that, this is the really fun part of the game for me. It's a codex of the different not animals, creatures, enemies, bosses. And if we go back, you can see that there are Xiao Yao, or small enemies, Yao Wang, which is underneath that, are bosses, Tomu are elites, and then Renwu are characters. Those are all locked right now, can't do anything with them. But here, for the small enemies, we just fought 2, and therefore we have the codex of them. And we have quite a bit of flavor text and story. And some of the story is allegories, trying to teach maybe lessons from Journey to the West. Sometimes it's allegories with just social concept, because Journey to the West was a political satire piece at the time. There was a lot of religious elements, but the author was someone who struggled to get a government position. He was hailed as sort of a child prodigy during his youth, but every time he went to take the imperial exam, he did very poorly on the actual exam. And every 3 years, there's an imperial exam. So he failed this one, 3 years later, failed again, 3 years later, failed again. He would keep taking it. His family's pretty well off, and he took the exam until his 50s, and then he finally passed. Now, when you pass, if you're not the highest scoring ones, you don't get a government job right away. You're put in reserves. So a bunch of people will pass every 3 years, and their name would be recorded down. And every time there's a job opening, because there's not just an endless amount of government hiring, but let's say a previous mayor died and there is a mayor opening somewhere, they'll go to this list of reserves and be like, hey, you can take this mayor job. So he's in his 50s, he finally passed, and he waits a couple years. There is a vice mayor job that opens up. He takes the job and gets framed for corruption, and he ends up in jail for a while. He does get out of it, but obviously very tragic. He does get back into government, and in his 60s, he finally just leaves and finishes his book. He wrote Journey to the West in his 30s, but he never published it. He wrote it sort of for fun. He was very into reading as a kid, which is why he thought he was a child prodigy. And he sort of wrote this draft where he combined a lot of stories that he read about monsters. He was every kid's interested in monster stories, and he sort of just combined it together into this very epic tale. And in his 60s, he finally compiles the whole thing, publishes the whole book. Didn't make any money in his lifetime, died very poor, but the book became a classic. It's named as one of the 4 best classic literature works in Chinese history, and that's why it's so well read and so well known, because of that high praise. It's on par with Romance of the Three Kingdoms, The Water Margin Story, and The Dream of Red Chamber. Although originally it wasn't The Dream of Red Chamber, because that wasn't written until late Qing Dynasty. It was Jinping Mei, which is kind of a sexual fantasy fiction story. Not fantasy, but fiction story. And that got replaced because it was deemed a little bit inappropriate, and they put A Dream of Red Chamber as the 4th one. Anyways, for this in particular, you always get a little couplet or poem at the top. And here we have the Wolf Scout and 儿小郎肝胆忠求盗窃赤炯炯劳一生望受穷难自料大梦空. So if you are fluent in Chinese, they're rhyming poems, which is quite impressive. If you read any of these classic literature, you know that aside from just being a story, it's littered with poetry in it. Not very advanced poetry, but at least very good rhyming couplets and huge stanzas sometimes. And this is no different, which is very nice. Now, the Wolf Scout, the story they have here, the flavor text, is that in the pack of wolf, there's a very small wolf, quite weak, but he desires to be strong, and he wants to get Rush to cultivate and ascend, and their goal is to reach immortality, to get more skilled, absorb natural energies, and be able to transform into human forms, be more powerful, eventually reaching immortality, or 成仙, right? But he hasn't spent very long because he's one of the small wolves in the pack. So he doesn't know that much. And he's very, feels very desperate to learn. He has anxiety. Then one day when he's scouting, he finds, a couple good jars of liquor. And when he passes by the mountain gate, so basically at the foot of the mountain, as you enter the mountain, it's called the mountain gate, he bumps into a guardian of the mountain that is another monster. In this case, it's Gu Huyuan, which is a cow, a male cow, a bull. Gu, that character means male cow. And he likes alcohol, and he knows this. So the small wolf knows that the bull guardian likes alcohol. So the bull guardian asked him for the alcohol that he found, and he thought, yeah, let me give you this alcohol. And they had it together. And during the drinking session, he asked him if he had any tricks to cultivation. And because the bull guardian, drank the alcohol, he teaches him a few moves. And the little wolf is super excited, goes home and start practicing. 2 months later, the little wolf feels like the moves he learned from the bull guardian is not helping him that much. So he wants to give up on that. He doesn't feel like that's going to do it. And he starts to think back, well, I was able to use alcohol as a gift to learn a few moves. So he searches around and finds a little golden Buddha statue. And he goes to, this time, the head of the scouting team. It's a scouting captain, and it's a snake monster. And he knows this snake monster likes money. So he gifts the golden Buddha statue to him. And after taking this gift, the snake, scout captain teaches him a few moves, and he's super happy, goes home, and he starts practicing what the snake teaches him. After 1 month, he feels like it's still not helping him that much. So he does this again. This time he fetches something else good and visits another monster. And over time, all the monsters, big and small, throughout the mountain has been visited by him. And he has heard all sorts of different cultivation methods from different creatures, like a bull, a snake, and obviously other animals in the mountain too. And he would practice this, one day, and then switch to another one the other day. And then eventually he finds out he's not progressing at all. And it got so bad that he started to forget how to use the saber moves taught by the wolf pack. So he doesn't know how to use his own pack's cultivation method anymore. And finally, one of the elder wolves in the pack, has a good heart, watches him struggle, and basically is like, let me teach you a couple moves so that you can remember how to use our saber method. And then he listens, and then, he hears all these things, and then everything he hears, he can, recall a different method from a different animal or creature. And then he basically counters, this is not the right way. You can do it that way. You can do it this way. And then he basically gets to the point where the old wolf gives up. And after that, no one in the pack is willing to teach him at all. And then this story is over. And this is an allegory. Basically, don't chew more than you can bite. Don't be so greedy and try to learn so many different skills. And Chinese saying, or even American saying, jack of all trade, it's basically you know nothing. And then we have the wolf, 剑客. So basically he's a sword master. And we also get a poem. I'm not going to read every single one of these. And he also has a story. So we'll try to simplify it because it does get very long. But this story actually connects with another story from a different monster later on. Essentially, we have this wolf who wears a white robe. One day he finds this beautiful blade, beautiful sword with gems on sort of the sheath and on the pommel. And the blade looks like snow white. It's very sharp. It must be very expensive. And he loves it. And he wears it all the time. And he shows it off every time he goes out. But every month, the little monsters have to pay tribute to their leader. And the leader here in this area is that black wind monster, the big black bear. And he hides the sword every time the tribute time comes. And all the other monster who knows he had the sword comes and ask him, you have this treasure. Why don't you tribute it to your boss? Do you want to, spend your entire life just on the scouting team? Don't you want him to, get a good gift and like you and promote you? And the white cloak, wolf here laughs. Our boss have so many good things. This sword might be super valuable to me, but I'm sure he doesn't actually care. And, look at you guys. You guys give him all sorts of stuff all the time. It's all garbage, and it doesn't look like he promotes any of you. So he just refuses to give his best thing as tribute, and no one, kind of can convince him otherwise. And he seems to be the type that, kind of slacks off during work. He, always have excuses. And if there is, peach on the ground, he eats it. If there's liquor to be found, he drinks it. So everything for himself. Very greedy, very selfish person, including the peach that he tried to eat earlier, which was us. And then one day, the boss, the Black Wind Bear, is opening this assembly where he wants to preach. Because in the original story, after he was defeated, Guanyin Pusa came over. So a Buddhist character came over. Pusa is character who is progressing towards being a Buddha. It's a step in Buddhahood. And Guanyin means the one who hears all the voices of the world, and thus she represents compassion. She's a very main character in the story. She's the one who finds the Tang monk to go to the West so that they can collect the teachings, the authentic teachings from Buddhists, basically India, where Buddhism came from, bring it back to the Tang dynasty and basically share the right teachings to the Buddhist monks in China at the time. It's a real story. It's based off a historical journey. Journey to the West did happen. There was a Tang monk who traveled to India during the Tang dynasty and brought back all these manuscripts and teachings of Buddhism to correct some of the incorrect versions that were in China at the time. And what really happened was, obviously you don't have all these fantasy elements, but it's a very difficult journey. And he wrote a book after he came back depicting all the small kingdoms he had to pass, all the stories he heard on the way there. And from that, we get more fantasy added in and adapted over time. And eventually by the Ming Dynasty, when the author of Journey to the West is writing his book, he's taking elements from that real story and then fantasy elements and religious elements from Chinese folklore, from Chinese Taoism, from Chinese Buddhism, and just mixing that all together. And that's why we ended up with this book. But anyways, in the original story, the Black Wind Bear, after he was defeated, he was not killed because Guanyin Pusa saw him as sort of a very enlightened character. He had a very fancy cave, and he decorated it as like a scholar character. He really cared about listening to Buddhist monks preach, which is why he placed his area right next to a Guanyin Chansi, which is where we're going right now in the story as well. And essentially, he was quite enlightened, and then Guanyin took him, brought him back to the southern seas where Guanyin is, had him guard an island. So this bear has been listening to Guanyin Pusa preach this whole time, and now he feels like he understands Buddhism. So he's coming back and hosting these assemblies himself to teach all these monsters how to cultivate from a Buddhist perspective to reach immortality, to be able to revive from the dead, all these things. And he's, writing all these little scrolls, which is weird because that's a Taoist practice, and asking his followers to eat the scroll. It's a paper scroll. You take like red ink, you scribble the inscriptions of whatever spell you're doing, and then you pass it on, and then you can either burn the scroll, put it in water and drink the water, or just eat the scroll. In this case, they're just eating the scroll. And then they start chanting, they start praying. And after a couple of hours, the boss asks everyone, does anyone feel anything? Right? Is the paper scroll, is the spell effective? Everyone looks around, and no one does anything until this white cloak wolf stands up first and says, I feel something. And then other monsters stand up after him, claiming they feel something too. And then the next day, the big black bear, the boss, promotes him to a little captain position. And everyone in private does not understand why he got the promotion. And this is an allegory too. It's basically saying, you can work very hard in a company and be the hard worker, but the boss, will never see it. But if you, kind of suck up to the boss when the boss is doing something and asks, does anyone feel something? If you're that first one to go suck up and says, I feel it, I feel your spell is working on me, I feel great after, listening to you preach about Buddhism and then eat this little scroll that doesn't do anything, but I will, come here and support you, you get promoted right away. Even though you're the slacker all the time and you keep things for yourself, you're sort of the selfish person, but you get rewarded. It's just another allegory. All right, and we're good. Let's continue here. We have a very linear stage design, but it does not mean there are not hidden areas. And this could get really interesting because, as you can see, you will bump into invisible walls sometimes where, like, as you can see, when we jump, there's no climbing here. We're just bumping into some sort of invisible wall here. And you'll probably see me, like, that looks like you can go somewhere, right? But you can't. And sometimes that's frustrating because there's no minimap. But it does encourage exploring since there are a lot of hidden content in the game. Like, that looks like you can go there, but no. This early part of the game, I think it is rather linear, but I'm not sure. So I feel super tempted to... Are we really going to fall over, or is this another invisible wall? Yep, another invisible wall. All right, we're just going to move forward for now, and teaches us how to run. Hold down right button, and we jump at... Oh, for a moment there, I thought we went over, and we have not. And that is a collectible. And we got ourselves 2 ginseng pieces. Don't worry, there's no long stories with this one. Basically a herb. Ginseng is a root vegetable. And it can be used in a variety of elixirs. Medicinal use. Ooh, he has a lot of health. He's not a new creature, so I'm guessing he's the Wolf Scout again, because he's not using a fancy straight-edge sword. I don't think we can jump down. Alright, we got ourselves this path up. And then we got ourselves some choices. It's sort of a false choice. You can go there, see the chest, and then you can turn and get to this place anyway. So let's go here and get the chest. It's teaching us how to store up energy for a charge attack. Like this. We have only 1 node, so this is as high as we can charge it. And then we're gonna release it on his head. He's the white cloak sword character. Oh, wrong button. There we go. We get 5 pieces of fragments of gold. And that's sort of a small elite boss. You can keep going this way, which is the way of the story. You can see the guide marks. But this is sort of the area we kind of skipped, which we can kind of prove by going back over here. Let's charge it up. Still a wolf creature, but obviously with weapon being different, it's a different class of character. And we're going to check him out. 狼力士, so strong man. 天不管地不收，逍遥自在荡悠悠，醉里还有乾坤大，醒来仇视一笔勾. And his story is also kind of cute, actually. So the monsters that scout rarely get to attend the feast inside the cave, and if they want to drink something good or eat something good, they have to find it themselves. And sometimes these smaller monsters try to transform into human form so that they could go to the village and try to, swindle their way to get some good thing to eat or something good to drink. But after a couple of times, the actual humans of the village start notice, their transformations are not that great because they're weak, small monsters, and sometimes they get captured, and the humans, they're not that strong, these wolf creatures. The humans can beat them up and kind of blame them for, eating for free or, drinking for free. And over time, these small monsters, they don't dare to go to the village anymore. And then one time, this guy here, the brute, he's laying down under a tree, kind of sleepy. And then he sees this big wolf, old wolf with sort of a feathered cloak. And the old wolf asks him, why are you not scouting the mountain? Why are you just laying down here? This wolf says, I want to go drink. I want some alcohol. But every time we transform, we get recognized. And now the only time I can feel that addiction is by dreaming. So dreaming about being drunk. The old wolf laughs and whispers to him, go find yourself an altar or like a shrine, and then just hide underneath the tablecloth. And then when they put offerings on the table, drink those alcohol. So after he says that, the old wolf disappears. And this monster, or this wolf, not monster, but this strong man wolf, kind of don't believe him, but wants to try. So he goes to an altar on the village that, is for basically ancestral shrine of one of the clans in the village. And he, hides under the tablecloth behind this, big statue that they're, kind of worshiping. Doesn't even know what, deity they're worshiping there. But there's a lot of good food and some good alcohol on the table as offering. So he follows what the old wolf teach him, hides under the tablecloth where the offering are, and start drinking all the alcohol. After a while, he's, so full, he starts to have hiccups from the drinking. And then the hiccup attracts all the people who are praying outside. And when they come in, he's still hiding under the tablecloth. He can't really get out. He's kind of scared. What do I do? But then all the people see, wait, our offerings have been eaten, the alcohol have been drunk. It must be one of the deities, comes to human form and, drinked it all. So the offering is, taken. And everyone's so happy because now they can pray and, the deity is definitely going to make it happen for real. And after the story got out, all the villagers nearby would come to this altar to pray because, deity is actually coming to this altar to drink the offering. And the wolf realizes he has an endless supply of delicious drinks now because all these offerings are coming. But after drinking for many days, he starts to feel this alcohol is not so tasty anymore. It's so boring to drink it all the time. And all he hears in his head are all these people with prayers. And these prayers are either super depressing because it depicts something super, super sad and they want it fixed, or they're super greedy where they want, more wealth or more health. And he feels like, it shows the dark side of humans. And he also feels depressed because he hears all this stuff and he knows he can't do anything about it. And the alcohol doesn't taste good anymore. And it got to a point where he felt like the alcohol he's drinking tastes bitter. It's just not good at all anymore. And then he can't take it anymore sitting here under the tablecloth hearing all these guys pray. So he pushes his way out, raises up all the jars of alcohol, slams them on the ground. And as the jar shatters on the ground, to everyone's surprise, he wakes up and he's still under the tree and he's dreaming. And there is no altar. There's no people. That whole thing did not happen. He takes a big breath, picks up his axe, and goes back to scouting. And the poem there reflects this. 梦里还有乾坤大. So in the dream, a whole universe, a giant world. So a lot of things happen in his dream. But 醒来愁是一笔勾. Once you wake up, all the things, the depression, the things that bother you, the stress, they go away like you cross them off with a stroke of a pen. And the whole idea here is that it's an allegory for greed, right? Those wishes that they have, whether it's, wanting more things or wanting things fixed, and the offerings, if you don't have a desire yourself, this is more of a Buddhist allegory, right? The alcohol to him is his greed, is one of his sixth sense. Right, we didn't talk about sixth sense. Sixth senses are your five senses, your regular, sight, your smell, your taste, your feel, and your hearing. And the sixth one is sort of your conscious, your heart. And that's sort of the Buddhist idea of sixth sense. And in Buddhism, you want your sixth sense to be cleared. You don't want them to bother you because things you see can make you desire, things you taste, things you hear, things that you think about. All these things can create desires. And when you have these wants, what it brings you are these prayers that he hears, the depression in the world, the greed in the world. So the things that, if you have this drive to desire after something, you have this greed or addiction to something, it's only going to bring you despair. And it's better to the point where you don't greed it anymore. If you let that go, you wake up and all the things that bother you before no longer bothers you, right? He didn't want to scout earlier because he wanted alcohol. But once he doesn't need that anymore, he goes back to scouting. So a lot of really awesome stories that they provided here. And after beating him, we got some silk strands. Yeah, we could have we came down that way, but leads to the same place. Doesn't seem to have any more hidden locations. And we move on. So this is the voice from the ground, and asking us to take one of our hair, which can transform into an incense, and pray at this altar. This is a 土地公. You can translate it as sort of a soil deity, which is why he looks very tubery. He says we look just like him. He's referring to Wukong. Look at all the skulls. I'll translate right after.
后来呀，这禅院又被重建了，可人心若是烧没了，修好一座破庙又有什么用呢？你不记得此地却是有些东西惦记着你。 来者不善，小猴子自求多福。
Alright, so he runs away when he hears the howling wolf gives us this little tablet or scroll. It allows us to revive at these shrines. These shrines are basically revival points, and they're also save points. If you offer your incense here, you can have the option to save. It does respawn all the mobs in the stage, and you can fight them again for a little bit more experience if you want to farm experience that way. But essentially what he is, 土地公, or sort of the soil deity, is the lowest tier of deities in sort of the Taoist celestial court bureaucracy, right? You have the celestial court in the heaven, which is where they send all those troops. But if you go down bureaucracy, just like it mimics, the real Chinese bureaucracy of having an emperor in the capital, when you go to the local area, he's like the local mayor. He's like the deity mayor of this land. And they call him the soil deity because depending on what your land is, if you have a mountain, then he will have some forms that features relating to the mountain. You have a valley, you have plains. So he governs sort of how fertile your local land is, how many birds or creature lives here. So he impacts the life of the people who actually live in the area. And he starts to get a lot of, I guess, 香火, basically incense being prayed to him by local farmers, by local hunters who rely on things that he, quote unquote, governs over for their livelihood. And he becomes a really popular local deity to pray to during the Ming Dynasty when the book is written. And the reason for that is because the first emperor of the Ming Dynasty started out as a beggar, and he worked in a 土地公庙, so like a temple for one of these creatures. So the importance of them kind of rose because the humble beginnings of the Ming Dynasty imperial family. And it's a pretty interesting side story. But we do get our save point here, as you can see. And we can rest, which will trigger all the mobs again, but we can refill our health as well as our gourd. So we haven't drank anything from our gourd. I think there's like 4 drinks in one gourd, not sure, maybe 3. But we get to heal back 1/3 for each drink that we take. We can teleport to any of the shrines that we have opened up before, and it counts as a heal as well. So basically we would heal and save and teleport to another shrine, basically how we move around the map. And we can pick up gifts. I think this is if you pre-order stuff. Right. Or if we bought... I did not get the deluxe edition, but I think we still get the gourd for pre-ordering, right, before the game was released. And we get a fancier looking gourd that we can equip and that we can leave as well. I'm going to use this save point to end our episode. I know we didn't do a lot of fighting. We just basically did the prologue and checked out some of the features of the game. And we'll try to do a bit more in the next episode. But the story element's really what intrigues me about the game. The game does a great job with that. And we'll come back and play it next time. Although we look kind of fuzzy right now. I don't know. Our hair is not looking great. Could be just depending on what's seen. Too much vegetation in the background, perhaps. You can see all the shadow glaring. It's a 3060 Ti that I have, so it's not top of the line, but it's still serviceable. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you all next time. Bye!